She started coming home later than the rain, later than the buses sighing outside our window, later than the lamplight on the kitchen tile. And somehow, even when she sat across from me, even when her phone was face down and the steam from her rice curled between us like a ghost learning to breathe, she felt further away than the traffic on the overpass. I didn't know how a shoulder could be at the table and still drift. I didn't know a voice could answer and still hide. I learned both at once, one quiet dinner at a time. There was a smell, faint and foreign, that didn't belong to our apartment's life of coffee, detergent, and old paperback glue. It was clean and sharp, like green rain on a cold stone. Not her perfume, not mine. It would appear on her scarf in winter evenings, and I would pretend the wind had changed, that an elevator had loaned its city air to our small rooms. I would touch the edge of the fabric, pretend to steady it, and feel the distance there too. We had an apartment that sounded like the ocean only after midnight, the radiator knocking, someone above us dropping shoes, tires brushing water. The couch had a dip where we used to pause movies just to talk about nothing, a dog one of us saw, the plant on the balcony that pretended to die and then fooled us with spring. Lately, the movies kept playing to the credits while our mouths were busy saying, "Fine, long day, you, same." Lately, our laughter lived in the past tense. She wore a sweater the color of rain clouds and looked beautiful in the way trains look beautiful from far away, lines and motion you don't belong to. Her hair was tucked behind one ear, her eyes were somewhere else. "You're quiet," I said. She smiled, the kind that apologizes without admitting anything. Tired, she sipped water. Her hand trembled, but it could have been the air vent. It could have been me, needing it to mean something. The strange cologne became a character in our house. It sat in the hallway after she passed. It lingered on the pillow she didn't use when she fell asleep on the couch with the TV's blue weather map soft on her face. It clung to the seatbelt in her car the morning I borrowed it, like a note left in a language my ribs could read, but my mouth could not translate. I rolled the window down, and the city answered with wet asphalt and bread from the bakery on the corner. The cologne stayed. I began to narrate my own life in murmurs when she wasn't looking. Natural rhythm, short lines, pauses that could swallow a man whole. "You're okay? Don't be dramatic. It's nothing." Every cup I washed had its echo. Every dish I placed, a ritual of not asking. Every night I waited for keys in the lock felt like adding one small stone to my chest and calling it patience. The first quiet discovery wasn't a message or a lipstick or a hair that wasn't hers. It was the way her smile returned to her face when her phone lit up on the counter and she turned away to check it, the way a private warmth displaced our kitchen light. It was the way her voice softened into someone I wasn't inside of. When she turned back, she was careful with me, like you are with a glass you've already chipped. "Want tea?" she asked. I nodded. We both pretended it was our idea to be gentle. The second discovery was at the sink late, when she came close to rinse a spoon, and I reached around her to shut off the tap. The scent lifted off her collar and moved through me like a sentence that started years ago and finally arrived. Not ours, not mine, not an accident of air. It pressed a finger to my chest and wrote something simple and terrible. "Here." If this were a different kind of story, I would have found proof, a picture, a receipt. Instead, the house did the speaking. The empty chair across from me said loneliness even while she sat in it. The rain said regret before anyone had earned it. The morning light, which had always made our small kitchen look like a promise, began to feel like a witness. I tried to keep my hands busy, folding shirts that didn't need folding, wiping a counter that kept forgiving the crumbs. Busy looks like control when you have none. She started wearing scarves again, even when the air became mild, even when the elevator hummed with spring. She tied them in little knots and patted them like you might soothe a living thing. I would watch the knot and think of a single word, hold. I would wonder what was being held back, what was being held together, and what would come undone if I tugged. One evening, I tried to cook something that smelled like memory, garlic and butter in a pan, a little lemon, the way we'd done when we moved in and used a cardboard box as a table. She came home, stood in the doorway, inhaled. The cologne arrived a second earlier than she did. It met the garlic in the air, and that collision, clean and sharp against warm and familiar, was the moment my heart learned two smells could argue without a sound. "Smells good," she said. "Yeah," I answered, and the syllable felt older than me. There is a collapse that makes noise, plates, doors, voices. Then there is the collapse that sits down beside you and gives you a glass of water. It looks like calm. It looks like two people eating spaghetti and talking about a coworker's cat. It looks like forgetting to kiss goodnight because you're both tired. It asks nothing dramatic of you. It simply changes everything and waits for you to notice. She went to shower after dinner. The bathroom fan whirred. The mirror ghosted. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom looking at her scarf draped over the chair, that rain-on-stone smell holding the fabric like a shadow. I lifted it, I put it down, I lifted it again. My hand didn't shake, I brought it to my face. The scent filled the space behind my eyes. There was a name in it, a face I didn't know, a streetlight where they'd said goodbye. I could see none of it and somehow everything. In the shower a bottle dropped, a small clatter, a small curse. She laughed at herself. I let the scarf fall. The radiator knocked once, twice. And then, as the water stopped and her steps came closer, I decided not to confront her yet. I decided to wait for the next small truth to arrive on its own feet. The door opened. She looked at me like she could hear a frequency I hadn't meant to broadcast. "What?" she asked, smiling. "Nothing," I said, and felt the floor learn a new language under us. That night when she fell asleep, her phone lit the room like a lighthouse, and the preview on the lock screen wasn't a name, just a single line of text. "Still thinking of you." I didn't touch it, I stared. Somewhere downstairs, the building's front door clicked, and footsteps crossed the lobby like an unfinished sentence. Sleeplessness isn't loud. It's a hum running under everything, a refrigerator that never turns off, a fan you forget to notice until it stops. The nights turned into miles walked between the bedroom and the kitchen, counting the grout lines on the tiled floor, adding up the quiet. The city outside kept its own promise. Occasional sirens, a bus letting go of air, rain doing its steady work on roofs and tire rubber and the backs of late smokers. The apartment learned my steps. I learned how the cupboards sounded at 2 in the morning. Traces of the affair, if the word belonged to my life yet, were domestic and therefore devastating. 2 cups in the sink when she claimed she hadn't eaten. A second spoon that wasn't mine in the dishwasher rack, turned the way she never turned them. The cologne, more patient than guilt, waiting on the knit of a scarf, the collar of a coat, the strap of a bag. I told myself 1,000 small stories. Her coworker hugged her, that's all. She walked through a department store and something clung. The elevator was full of strangers and their lives had meteor tails. I told myself these until the sun came up and the stories no longer believed me. I didn't spy. That felt like a bridge I couldn't cross without burning what remained of me. Instead, I became a weather reporter inside my own kitchen. Pressure rising, visibility low, chance of sudden showers in the afternoon. The coffee tasted like it did on our first April in this apartment, a little bitter, a little brave. I poured 2 cups, set one near the spot where she would put down her bag. She entered with a soft apology in her shoulders. The cologne entered with her like a handsome stranger who had learned the code to our door. "You made coffee," she said. "Thanks." She kissed my cheek, quick as a clock. The heat of the cup traveled my hand. "We didn't talk about sleep." The man himself existed only in photographs I didn't have, in angles of her smile that turned away from me. I tried not to imagine his face. I tried and failed. He was every man on the sidewalk with a navy coat and an umbrella, every laugh behind a closed taxi door, every text bubble that appeared and disappeared on her screen while she cut vegetables, the knife tapping the board in a tempo I once thought belonged to us. If I had to name him, I would call him timing. Timing takes things we would have sworn were solid. Timing knows the map of lonely people. In the afternoons, when I worked from the small desk under the window, the rain made the street below look like graphite. The radiator's hiss was a companion I didn't deserve and couldn't do without. I answered emails. I paid a bill. I ordered more detergent. Domestic action as resilience, not glamorous but real. The plant on the balcony, after threatening to die again, pushed one stubborn new leaf through the dust. I told it thank you quietly. When she texted, "Late tonight, don't wait," the words didn't stab, they settled. The body knows when to conserve movement. I set one place at the table and ate slowly, letting the fork put down what the heart couldn't. The chair across from me wore her sweater like a ghost. I wanted to hate. It would have been active, a fire under cold hands, but what arrived was smaller, rounder. It was grief with manners. It cleaned up after itself. A turning point is rarely a trumpet, it's a click. One evening I pulled a bag of laundry from the bedroom floor, and that smell rose up at me like a memory, and instead of stopping, I put it in the washer. I poured the detergent. I turned the dial. I started the machine and stood there with the lid open, watching water become an answer. The drum churned, the scarf submerged, the scent diluted into something else, clean, anonymous, ours again for a moment. I wasn't punishing her. I was reclaiming the... On her nightstand, a small box of throat lozenges, a paperback with a woman walking away on the cover, a hair tie that had snapped and knotted back together. The symbolism was not subtle. The world can be cruel that way. I touched the knot and thought, this is what we do to keep holding. We cut circulation so the thing won't fall apart. In the mirror above the dresser, my face looked older, not from years, but from the hours of not saying what I knew. She called me once from the street. I could hear the rain nodding on her umbrella. Don't wait up, she said. Okay, you're good, she asked. The tone was careful, like a nurse asking a question she knows the answer to. I'm here, I said. Silence. We both listened to the rain, the way you listen to someone breathing when you don't know what to say. See you soon, she whispered, as if saying it softly made it truer. The line clicked. I stood in the kitchen, phone in hand, and let the faucet run until the water went colder than the words soon. I didn't look for him, but I learned his pattern secondhand. She laughed in the shower now, a light, surprising sound that used to belong to Sunday mornings when we would burn pancakes and eat them anyway. She came home with a kind of tired that people wear after being awake for love or for lying. Both take the same muscles. She hummed a tune I didn't know. When I asked, she said, radio. I let it be the radio. I let everything be what it said until the truth arrived, tired of being misnamed. The turning point inside me was quiet resilience. Not the kind that posts quotes, not the kind that runs 20 miles, the kind that cleans the stovetop, the kind that puts the good towels out for a guest that isn't coming, the kind that remembers to laugh at a dumb commercial and lets the laugh die when it wants to, without forcing it into a mood. I began to sleep on the edge of the bed, not as punishment, but because edges feel honest when you're deciding if you're going to fall. One late night, she came in soaked, shoes chirping small apologies to the mat. The cologne was washed thin by the weather, but it was there, stubborn as a bruise under makeup. She peeled off her coat. You're up, she said. Couldn't sleep. She took a step toward me, then stopped like she'd reached an invisible rope. We stood across from each other, two people who knew two different versions of the same week. Tea, she offered. Sure. The kettle's hiss gave our silence a job. She turned away and wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, fast, like a person late for a... When she set my cup down, her sleeve pulled back, and there it was, a faint smear of the cologne at her wrist, as if he'd touched her there to say something only skin could hear. And she saw that I saw, and her mouth opened around a word that didn't arrive. The kettle clicked off, the apartment waited. Say it, I wanted to tell her, but the voice that came out said, it's late. She nodded, and the nod contained 1,000 unmade choices. She sat, and the chair sounded tired. We were the kind of quiet that makes the neighbors turn down their TV, not out of curiosity, but respect. Sometimes grief looks like good manners. I'm sorry, she said. The words landed weightless, as if they had been carried too long. About being late, I asked. It wasn't cruelty. It was arithmetic. Add what's said to what's missing and see if the sum equals sleep. She closed her eyes like a person trying to stop a song from getting stuck. About all of it. She opened them again. The blue of midnight lived in them. She reached for the mug, steam braided between us and unraveled. I didn't plan, she stopped, corrected. I didn't expect. Another stop. Honesty and justification share the same fork in the road. She was standing there, deciding. He had a name, she didn't say it. She folded the name into a napkin with her hands and put it down next to the sugar bowl. It wasn't supposed to be anything, she said, which is what all tender disasters say before they lose their first tooth. He listens, he sees me. The sentence felt like a polite theft. Not the kind where you grab and run, but the kind where you put a painting under your coat and explain color theory to the guard. I see you, I said, which sounded like a plea and a fact at once. Did I? Lately, I had seen the back of her head as she scrolled, the curve of her shoulders under a coat someone else had learned, the outline of her body as she slept with the covers holding her the way hands used to. I had seen her, but had I looked? The question stood up and walked the length of the kitchen and came back. We broke, she whispered. Not all at once, like threads. She mimed pulling something until it thinned and became air. I kept tying them, but the knots got ugly. She glanced at my face the way you check a stove burner you thought you turned off. I didn't want to hurt you. The sentence was so common it felt like room temperature. It warmed nothing, cooled nothing. It just existed, proof of a climate we were both breathing. The confrontation was raw but restrained, an arrangement of simple notes. Who, when, why, how long? Do you love him? Did you love me? Do you still? Each question came out like a spoon set on the table. Each answer came back like a spoon too, useful but incapable of cutting. The psychology of it was not a courtroom. It was a hospital waiting room with bad coffee and good intentions. I don't know, she said to do you still, and that was the kindest cruelty of the night. I won't beg, I said softly, to her and to the radiator and to the plant that had decided to live again. Dignity isn't a flag, it's a coat you shrug into because the weather has turned. I'm not asking, she said, and the honesty of it was a small, sharp mercy. We were two people who understood the value of not making promises you can't sustain. Her return wasn't a grand entrance. She had never truly left. Her toothbrush was where it always was. Her sweater knew the shape of the chair. but the version of her that had leaned somewhere else, stood under someone else's light, rested her head against a different window. She returned to the room slowly, like a person touched by fog, familiar and altered. "I ended it," she said, eyes on the rim of her mug. The words were new, the cologne was faint, not fresh. "Tonight." Guilt and dignity sat down together between us, like old neighbors who don't speak, but share a wall. "I didn't want to lose you," she said. "You didn't want to choose," I thought and didn't say. She winced at something only she could hear. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," she added. "Good," I said, and meant it kindly. Forgiveness asked for is a receipt. Forgiveness given is weather. We talked until the night loosened its grip and became early morning. It wasn't a negotiation. There was nothing to trade. It was an inventory, who we had been, what we had become. Where the quiet started, when the dinners went empty before the plates were cleared, we spoke in images because facts felt too blunt. The couch dip, the balcony leaf, the rain's handwriting on the street. When she cried, she did it like she was remembering how, like a person searching her pockets for an old key. "I can leave," she said more than once. "I can go to my sister's." The apartment flinched at the thought. It knew her footsteps like a favorite song knows its own chorus. "Not tonight," I said. "Sleep." The word felt like a blanket I could still offer. She nodded. We made the bed together without touching hands. The sheets learned the new map of us. Sun had not arrived yet, but a lighter gray lived at the edges of the blinds. She stood in the doorway, holding the fabric of her shirt like it could answer something. "Do you hate me?" she asked. "No," I said, and it was the truth and a sentence I would have to learn how to live under. Hate would have simplified the road. Love complicated it, as usual, with openings and detours. She turned to the window, and in her reflection, her face looked like someone about to jump and someone about to step back. She whispered, "If I'm not the person you married anymore, can I still be someone you know?" The radiator clicked once like a coin in a jar. I didn't answer. Morning didn't knock, it diffused. The light in our kitchen was honest and indifferent, laying itself down on the crumbs and the clean plate with the same grace. The coffee smelled like a decision. Outside, tires hissed over last night's rain, and the bus stop gathered its small congregation of people with earbuds and hopes. The apartment felt newly arranged, even though we hadn't moved a thing. We ate toast in a quiet that was not a threat for the first time in weeks. It was a bridge. Letting go wasn't an act, it was a posture, shoulders lowered, jaw unclenched. Hands empty on the table. She watched me watch the steam leaving my mug, and there was a recognition there, a shared understanding that what breaks and heals are not always opposites. Sometimes they are two words for the same set of hours. "I can pack a bag," she said. "Not yet," I answered. "We'll do this in daylight." We owed Light the chance to see us properly. There were apologies still, but they had lost their sales pitch. They arrived like weather reports. Accurate, unexcited. We put the mugs in the sink together and didn't make it symbolic, though everything wanted to be. In the living room, the couch waited, a museum of us. We didn't sit. Empty rooms resemble loneliness, but also possibility. The space between two people can be a wound or a... We went through the ordinary as if it could teach us something. Laundry shifted from the washer to the dryer. The balcony plant received water with the gratitude of a survivor who won't make a speech. The bed was made again after the caddy corner fold went wrong. "What happens to us?" she asked, not as a test, but like someone asking for directions, even though she knows she'll walk alone. "We let each other go without making it an injury," I said, surprised by my own mouth. The sentence sounded like it had been living under the floorboards, waiting for light. She sat at the small desk under the window and wrote a few addresses. Sister, mother, friend. I watched her shoulders for signs of collapse and saw instead a quiet, old strength that had nothing to do with me. It relieved and broke me in the same motion. "You were home," she said suddenly, as if a verdict had arrived. "I know," I said, because some truths don't need. We packed a bag together. The zipper sounded like a forgiveness we could manage. She chose the gray sweater, the one Rain had once looked good on. She brought it to her face, inhaled, and made a face like a person tasting a memory that had changed. The cologne was gone. The laundry had done what love could not. She folded the sweater. At the door, shoes on, keys in hand, she turned. "Thank you," she said. "It could have been for a decade of firsts. It could have been for this morning's coffee. It could have been for not making a scene when the scene was begging to be made." "Take care," I answered, not as a farewell cliche, but as instruction. We stepped into each other's arms once, a long, unromantic hug that put a period at the end of a tender, complicated. When the door closed, it was not a slam. It was an ending written in a hand that had learned restraint. The apartment exhaled. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of things that could begin. The plant on the balcony caught a small piece of sun and showed it off like a ring. I washed the two mugs, and the sound of water in the sink was a companion, not a... Forgiveness arrived as a morning job, not a miracle. It asked me to feed myself, to make the bed, to answer one work email, to text a friend back. It didn't ask me to forget. It asked me to not weaponize memory. It asked me to retire from trying to win. Outside, a child laughed at a dog that didn't understand leashes. The laugh came through the window and landed on the table like a cue. Later, I walked to the corner and bought bread. The woman at the bakery wrapped it in paper that spoke softly. "Fresh," she said. Back home, the knife serrations made their own weather on the crust, and the crumbs scattered like a small constellation. I ate standing up, as if I were in a kitchen I would soon move out of, even though I wasn't going anywhere. The apartment was still ours, but the word ours had moved its furniture. By afternoon, the rain had cleaned the city and left it damp and brave. I opened the window and let the air exist without choosing a side. The chair across from me was empty, and its emptiness was not a threat. It was a seat waiting for whoever I was becoming. I sat in my own chair and let my shoulders learn the room again. Final line. In the honest light of a quiet kitchen, with coffee gone cold and the morning finally choosing me, I let the last of her go like breath held too long, and for the first time in months, the silence sounded like a beginning.